Hi, friends.
Hi.
Hi. We are currently caught in a rainstorm. As you see, we have our umbrella covering us over, and we want to talk a little bit about it. I'm Sarah.
I'm Natalie.
And I'm Roxy.
And we're so excited to talk to you about culture. All right, here's some definitions on this wonderful umbrella topic that we've decided to discuss with you today.
So the definition of culture, according to Sonia Nieto, is that it's the ever-changing values, traditions, social and political relationships, and worldview created, shared, and transformed by a group of people bound together by a combination of factors that can include a common history, geographic location, language, social class, and religion.
And so the definition of culture, we do not want to limit to food, tradition, or any act that just kind of goes with a certain group of people, but rather day-to-day life that people live and experience every single day. And so we further want to discuss not only culture, but the things that rely under this beautiful umbrella that we've created for you all, which is schools.
Yeah, so pretty much a way so that everyone can understand the true definition of culture is through ethnic studies. And generally speaking, ethnic studies involve different races, and they take all that history and culture content and bring it into the classroom, and makes it easier for our future generations to really know what culture is, and not mix up culture with different stereotypes that we hear so often. So specifically, an example of that would be the Mexican American Studies program in Tucson. Wait, am I going to ahead of myself? Okay.
We're good.
So in Tucson, wait, am I?
You're good.
Okay.
So in Tucson, Arizona, they experimented with Mexican American studies as well as many other ethnic studies. However, Mexican American studies were ones that brought a little bit more uproar from the society around it. And so later on in the video, Roxy will be discussing a little bit more about that and the benefits and the inclusivity, as well as some of the terror brought along. And as for me, I'll be talking about the pedagogy of the oppressed by our beloved Paulo Freire, that every IES professor will just tell you how much he is so amazing. And so we are here to tell you the same. Paulo Freire discusses the pedagogy, which is a big word. I know. I had to look it up too. It's the method or the practice of teaching and teaching of the oppressed. So we are looking further into how Paulo wrote and discussed about the new relationship that can be had between teachers, students, and the society around it. And that's the definitions of what we'll be discussing. We look forward to discussing further with you. And
Hi guys, welcome back. So as we were saying earlier, or just a few seconds ago, so for example, like I was saying, the ethnic studies program in Tucson, there were a lot of controversial viewpoints, and one of them, according to the NPR article, someone was saying how that program promotes resentment towards a race or class of people, and it also advocates ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals. So that's definitely one controversial standpoint, which a lot of people did agree with, and obviously that's why there was such a big movement to take down this awesome program. So like I was saying, this specific program actually benefited a lot of students, and it actually improved the graduation rate at this specific school district. So that goes to show how important this program was, and how it included diversity of viewpoints, and something that hadn't been incorporated into the school district. And as far as solutions to this dilemma of not being enough ethnic studies programs. I think that the public school system as well as the private school system should definitely incorporate more of these programs in order for people to really grasp the notion of what culture really is, which Natalie will explain to you in a few seconds. And an example of how much in need we are of these programs is actually in one of my classes, our professor asked us to kind of create our perfect high school. And he split us up into two groups, and both of these groups came to a consensus that we would both want our perfect high school to include ethnic studies. And coming from a university standpoint, and us as college students, the fact that we all came to an agreement that we need these types of programs kind of says a lot of how in demand they are and how little exposure we have to them. So I think that would definitely be a huge step forward to our future generations, as well as a lot of us future teachers and stuff. It's just really benefiting our community as a whole, and I think that would definitely be a huge solution for like I said, our future generations, and classes like these, like IES102 and my 302 class. So I think that just goes to show a lot.
Definitely. Ethnic studies, I think, are a huge benefit to a lot of the schools that have been implementing them into their curriculum. And so to talk about more about curriculum and just the true benefits that students have when learning from more than one viewpoint, I'm going to talk about Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is written by Paulo Freire. And a quote that I found within chapter 1 is, pedagogy which must be forged. So this is what Paulo is trying to create within his book. He was trying to represent and even try to describe a little bit more about what he was trying to pass through all of the different school systems and teach and make it a lifelong learning process. And so he was trying to create a pedagogy which must be forged with, not for, the oppressed in the incessant struggle to regain their humanity. Thus, Paulo was referring to the fact that due to the fact that the oppressed and the oppressors, it's become so evident that a dehumanization process has started to occur, and this has allowed almost a way of lack of recognition for one another and their culture and their understanding of where one another comes from, or even what person has struggled through what. And so some different viewpoints that we kind of took off of this are how it's easy to say and look at different people and say, oh, they're a minority and this is a culture, this is different than what maybe I've experienced, but people go through different things, no matter what their skin looks like. People go through different things. People could be of different SES, socioeconomic status, and still go through different things. And then also, I think people don't always recognize the privilege that they have from the way that the world looks at them and the way that society can treat them. And a certain example that we wanted to use and we're even discussing in class was the business professor here at Chapman that decided to take it upon himself to teach the women in the classroom about how they can be more assertive in a class full of men. And this man who was not recognizing his privilege, he took it upon himself to tell another group of individuals who are more oppressed than he is to, in a way, he taught them how to not be as oppressed, which is kind of interesting. And so by this man by giving his information and his wealth of information, he was lifting up these individuals with his, as Paulo Freire would describe it, his false generosity. And this man could have just been purely doing this out of the goodness of his heart and recognizing that he's known tips and he's learned tips through so many different years of being a business professor, yet he was found upon for doing it due to the fact that he's more privileged than these individuals who he was teaching. And it's different because in class we were talking about how he was very much in the wrong and he didn't know what he was talking about, and it was very wrong for him to keep these women 30 minutes after class, but he could have also been doing this to lift up the spirits of these girls. And I think that was an interesting viewpoint to look at it, kind of the opposite. And then real life example, here at Chapman we have a lot of students who also do not recognize the privilege that they have, and they are often more of the oppressors rather than the oppressed. And that has a lot to do with the lack of education, a lack of recognition in where they stand within society and the way that they are viewed, and a way in which that we can continue to have these viewpoints looked at differently would just be, as Paulo says, would be to continue the education of humanizing one another and recognizing that we're all human and that we all go through different things, but we can't ignore the fact that we are all different as well. And so by continuing to recognize the privilege, continuing to have empathy for one another, I think empathy is the biggest project to work on, and to educate one another in that. And so then we go into culture.
Wait. Also keep in mind, I forgot to mention this earlier, that in these programs, these Mexican American Studies programs, Paulo Freire's teachings and everything Sarah just mentioned is very much so incorporated into these programs. So that's definitely one intersectionality that would be incorporated and be intertwined. So yeah, and then another intersectionality would definitely be what Natalie's about to say.
So culture ties into this because a lot of the oppressors are people who maybe don't understand or don't know the full definition of what culture is. So actually in the Ladson Billings article, she discusses about the misconception of culture, and one quote that I pulled out from that is that what I mean by this, the misconception of culture, is that culture is randomly and regularly used to explain everything. So at the same moment teacher education students learn nothing about culture, they use it with authority as one of the primary explanations for everything from school failure to problems with behavior management and discipline. So looking at those who misconstrue culture would be a very different viewpoint from what we've learned about, because we've learned about how culture is a lot more than just the food and traditions, but those people maybe only have the experience of seeing it at some cultural fair where it's just about food, or different examples of a heritage fair like we were talking about earlier. So these are just the different viewpoints. And then an example of how someone could misconstrue it is when in the Ladson Billings article there was a student who couldn't bring in anything for show and tell. She got upset at them and blamed it possibly on culture, that's why they couldn't bring anything in, but it could just be more because they were poor, and that could be tied to their culture, but it's a lot more than that. But we're gonna keep going. And then so another real life example of this is when I was working in a high school classroom a couple years ago. A lot of the students there was the lowest level of math, and a lot of them were of Hispanic culture, and it was a lot of times misconstrued that they were there because their culture, because they weren't as smart or something, but it was because they actually had learning disabilities. So that's another way where culture was misidentified, instead of saying no, they have these learning disabilities and that's why they have to be in this classroom. And so a solution to this is just to educate more on culture and to have everyone be more aware of the full definition of it as Nieto gives it, because it's a lot more than just the food or holidays that can often be tied to it.
So definitely the kids in our public school system and even private school systems could definitely benefit with these ethnic studies programs in order to learn more about culture and be more educated and well aware and not be the oppressors, and then go ahead and teach that to our other generations to come. So to conclude,
we wanted to thank you for listening and just recognizing that our society is still very much in progress and still has so much to learn about the way we all interact with each other. And so yeah, there's definitely viewpoints upon different topics that we've discussed, but we hope that we've enlightened you just a little bit more. Thanks for listening.
thank you.
Thank you.
And